Okay, we are recording now, so the class is officially in session. I want to welcome you all and thank you for joining me today. Just a quick recap of Zoom. If you've not taken Zoom classes before, it is absolutely wonderful. You always get a front row seat. You don't have to worry about dragging all your supplies. Everything's right at your fingertips. If you need to take a break, you just kind of slip away and come back. We do keep a pretty good pace going on. If you do happen to fall behind or you get tired and you're ready to take a break and just watch, you have that peace of mind of knowing that the class continues to be recorded. You will be receiving that Friday, right, Lindsay?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Okay, since this is not a weekend, you will get that tomorrow then. And when you receive the class link, we do advise that you download it. You can put it on a thumb drive or earmark a special file in your computer and store it there. That way you will always have it. We have to pay for storage on the Zoom cloud, so we can only maintain our videos for so long, and then we start deleting the older ones. So to ensure that you have your video for always and forever, make sure you download it to a thumb drive. If you, during the class, if you do have problems with reception, please note that other things may interfere with the recording. For example, if you're streaming music or your husband's watching Netflix, all of that can slow down your reception. You can, the easy fix or the first thing you should do is just turn it off and then turn it back on. A lot of times that fixes whatever might be going on. And then also, if all else fails, you might switch to your iPhone. I know it's a lot smaller, but again, you will be getting a recording to watch it later. So you can still watch it today, and then you'll have the video to watch later. We do mute everyone so that there are no background noises. It gets very confusing, and if everybody's talking, and even little sounds like rustling of paper makes a lot of noise. The microphones on computers and iPhones are really sensitive, so they do pick all of that up. The class is 4 hours long today, so it will be over around 4-ish. If you do have questions, I have Lindsay here. See her little hand there? That's Lindsay. She will be monitoring the class and following all the questions. So if there's a question that she can't answer, she'll pass it on to me. So please feel free, if you do have a question, put it in the chat and we'll make sure to address that. No sharing of class videos, please. We can tell if you share them, so please keep that in mind. And I think that's kind of all of the just general Zoom questions. It's, you know, unfortunately with the way this year has been, it's really caused a problem with conventions and classes and whatnot. But aren't we thankful for technology? The thing that we dreaded, you know, years ago now has become one of our best friends. My mom is in the hospital, and I found out last night that I can talk to her via Zoom. So tonight I'm going to talk to her with Zoom. So, I mean, how awesome is that, to be able to spend time with your loved ones in places that normally we just wouldn't be able to. So kind of excited about that. Okay, your project today. And I will tell you, while I'm talking, if you want to take a minute, let's switch it over here. Let me darken this just a touch. Get my little. Okay, if you have your piece painted white, while I'm talking, if you could just transfer, and you can see here, I've got just the top of the hat and his brim and below his chin. So take a minute to do that while I'm talking. We'll just kind of go over what you should have ready. Your pieces are base coated white, and I do always seal with a little bit of wood sealer, because even though this is MDF, I always recommend sealing. You're just going to ensure that you will always have paint that sticks, and you're going to have a nice surface to paint on. you should have, if your pattern has 3 pages, and then you have a bigger sheet or a sheet with a bigger image on it. This just makes it a little easier for reference, because sometimes these pictures on the front are so tiny that you lose a lot of detail. So if you want to keep this larger image close by for reference, that sometimes makes it a little more helpful to discern what we're talking about. There's 3 pieces: the head, the holly, and the twist. And then also, if you bought the bundle, there's the Holly Fun stencil. And this just makes it a lot easier. And I know years ago, when stencils first came out, everybody was like, oh, I don't want a stencil because that's cheating. And now we're going, you mean I have to paint the letters? Where's the stencil, right? So things do change over the years. Stencils are no longer cheating. They are painting tools. And we do use the painting tools to make our painting just a little less stressful. You get really perfect end results, and it takes a lot less time. And I think we're always looking for a way to stretch our time out, because we want to spend our time doing the things that really are going to make it look good, as opposed to being fussy about painting each little individual star. Oh my gosh, just put a stencil on there. We're going to get the stars on there. It's going to look fantastic. And then we can move on and spend more time with things like the eyes. Okay, I did do a vellum transfer, and I just shoot this through. This is the laser vellum. You can just shoot it through your printer, and it makes a really nice line drawing. So I usually do this for all my line drawings. It saves me time, and I'm always for something that's going to give you a good end product, but yet save you time. All right, I think we've got everything covered. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. This is the finished piece, so I'm going to move that to the side, and let's go ahead and start getting the paint on the brush. I'm going to start with the head. Now, on the hat and the collar and the jingle bells, I did not coat those heavy. With the face, I want to get a little bit of a more opaque coverage, because we want more of a solid look. With the hat, you get more depth with just a light wash. So let's go ahead and base coat the face with, I'm going to tone that down just a little bit. That seems bright. Is that better? Maybe that's a little better. You know, when you move into a different room, the lighting is always just a little bit different. Using the warm beige, formerly known as shading or flesh tone. Thank you, Lindsay. I'll lighten this up just a little bit. Okay. And I like to use, I'm using the 3/4 inch oval wash. This is a Jo Sonja brush. Love this brush. The bristle almost feels like a blush brush, like for makeup. Super soft. Wasn't real sure when I first got it. I thought this can't be a very good brush with these soft bristles. Oh my goodness, they put the paint on so smooth. You never get brush marks. It's just super, super nice. Now I noticed here, just look down, and I noticed my line tracing comes up about, let me go in just a little bit more. Takes just a moment for it to get focused. Can you see how his hat sits up above his ear? I want it to go right down to that point. So I'm going to correct that line so that I have that line right down there. So take a look. His hat's going to sit right on his ears. We want that to be tucked in right there, so that we have that nice fit on his head. And the only reason I corrected it now is because we're not using heavy layers of paint. And so to go back and try to touch that up sometimes can be a little time consuming. All right, I've got my brush. I'm going to load it pretty heavily. And that's one thing I like about this oval wash. It's a big brush. I can put a lot of paint in there, and then I can really cover the surface quickly. And I can go right around that top edge. Now what I'm looking for here is just a nice even coat. If it's not super opaque, that's fine. It's going to take two. And I would rather put one smooth coat on. And then when you go back to put your second coat on, it's going to be so much easier because you're not going to have all those brush strokes to try to cover up. And make sure on his chin, again, that it's going to be right there on the point. I had to move my face up just a little bit. So pay attention to those little details. And you know, when you do trace patterns, sometimes they shift a little bit. So just pay attention. If you catch it in the beginning, it's not going to be a big deal. Okay. Going to go in next. We'll just let that dry. We're going to jump around a little bit. And I'm going to work with the top of the hat next. And I'm using True Red. And I didn't shake it up well, and I have that mixing medium in there that helps keep the paint from drying out. Now I need to get in those little corners. If I use this oval wash, it's going to be hard for me to get in those little corners. So this is my next favorite brush. This is a 3/4 inch angle. It's also a Jo Sonja brush. Love these brushes. And I'm going to load a fair amount of water in my brush. Want to be able to really move this paint around quickly. Also want to be able to get it on smoothly. So if you have heavy paint that is not movable, you know, you put it on and it just kind of stays there and you have to push it around. It takes a lot longer to cover it. You're going to get a real thick, heavy coverage. We want a light wash. And if I go in these little V areas, I have to really be careful and get in those areas. I can use the toe of my brush to just really cover that well, but I want this paint to stay fluid enough so I can go back and blend it in quickly. So you don't have those stop and start lines. You're just looking for that even coverage at this point. And if that paint has enough moisture in it, you have more working time. Now, I do know there's certain areas of the country. I taught in New Mexico and Arizona, and it's just their dry time is so much different. So be aware of the environment you live in, because that will also make a difference on the dry time. Okay, now I don't have heavy paint, but it's on there nice and smooth, and that's what we're kind of looking for. When we go back to add the next layer on, that's when it starts to smooth out. So you don't need to spend a lot of time putting the base coat on nice and heavy. You just want it smooth and even. So that's kind of what you're looking for at this point. And my face is dry. I'm going to go in and just erase that tracing line so I don't have to deal with it later. I'm going to use that little mono 0. I am notorious for getting down to the finish, and I'm so excited that I'm finished, and I put that spray of varnish over there and I seal it all up, and then I look at it and think, oh, I didn't erase my tracing lines. So I constantly have to deal with that. And I know my base coat looks a little spotty, but I'm okay with that because it's nice and smooth. So I can blend it in with the second coat. And I know I'm going through the base coating rather quickly because that's what I want you to do as well. Put enough paint, water on your brush so that you can flow over it smoothly and quickly, and use a big enough brush that you can cover that area without taking a tremendous amount of time. To me, base coating is the boring part. So if we can crank that out rather quickly, then we can move on to the fun times. All right, make sure this is dry, and we're going to lay in that second coat using the same brush, a fair amount of water in there because I want to make sure that I can cover a lot of area, move that paint around and blend it in. Now, I'm not too worried about the top of his head because he's going to have all that hair, but you still want to smooth it out because you don't want that area, the what if the hair doesn't cover it up? What if that part shows? You don't want any what if regrets. And just that brush is so perfect for going around all those curves, blending that in just like that very quickly. And that should put a nice coverage on his face. And we did 2 light coats. One thing great about having that white base coat underneath, that's going to give you a lot of brightness so that when you put a light colored paint on it, it helps that paint, it kind of gives it a glow. It just like there's a light on behind it. So it really will ramp up the colors and add a lot of brightness very easily with, and it also eliminates that need for a heavy, solid opaque coverage. And I am using the Ranger heat tool. I really like that. It's super hot. It dries very quickly. The only thing you do need to remember, you can't linger in any one area because you can scorch your paint. So usually if you see me, I have my hand down there. If it's too hot for your hand, it's too hot for the paint. So if you kind of keep your hand there as you're going over it, you can tell if it gets too hot. So just move it around. But it is a super nice tool. Now that we have that coverage on the face, we're going to jump back up to the hat and add another coat of that true red onto the base coat. Again, I'm using plenty of paint and plenty of water so I can move that around very easily. And this should really smooth that coat, that base coat on there so that you don't have a real heavy coverage, but you have a nice even coverage very quickly. And you can tell, look at it, you can tell. Now remember too, we're going to have a lot of design on the hat, a lot of shading. So I always tell, don't stress too much, just make sure it's nice and even, because sometimes a little bit of light and dark will resonate as highlights and lowlights and give a little extra texture to it. The face, not so much, but on the hat, you know, you can go with that light and dark. All right, and I think my face is going to need one more coat. And even though I'm putting 3 coats on, it's still much quicker and smoother than one heavy coat. And this one I can just really glide over quickly. And I encourage you to paint quickly. It does not mean losing control of your brush. You still want to be able to direct your brush, take care on the edges, but when you cover it smoothly and quickly, it's going to result in a much more even finished look. So I've got 3 light coats on the face and it looks great. I've got 2 light coats on the hat and it's going to look great. I'll dry those up real quick. Everybody take a breath. Are you still with me? I don't see anybody pulling their hair out yet. Okay. Debbie's drinking something, so I know Debbie's up with me. Good job. Okay. We're going to let the face dry a little bit more and work on the hat, and then we'll jump back to the face. And I've got just a little bit more here I'm going to dry. Give you a couple minutes to do that, and I'll talk about the stencil. The stencil I used on my original is this one. It has just a really nice design in it. As far as if you don't have this exact stencil, anything with design in it is going to work well. You could do anything with scroll work, just anything to kind of fill it in. And after this is finished, it's just kind of a quiet little added design. It just dresses it up and kind of eliminates that flat look. So the stencil is, and you could even do stroke work on it. It's just something very subtle to give a little more pizzazz to your piece and just a little more design there as well. Okay. If you are ready, we're just going to take that stencil and look at how it lies on your piece. And by that, I mean, see, there's an empty spot here. That means that part of the hat's not going to have any design on it at all. So kind of scooch it around so that the bulk of the hat has design on it. You just want to know that you're going to add a little bit of design in there. And I am using dioxazine purple. And this is a really strong color. And by that, I mean, you don't need much at all to really get a nice look on it. This is a very, very soft design. It's very thin and transparent. It's almost just like an airbrush. We don't want it dark and heavy. This is a very soft, kind of a quiet design. Using my number 4 Spectacular stencil brush, and I'm going to go into that dioxazine purple and just get a little bit of paint on my brush, work it into the bristles super, super well. I don't think I got nearly enough there. Okay, and I'm really working that into my bristles so that I have a fair amount on my brush. But I don't want it heavy, so I'm going to take it on my paper towel, wipe most of it off. So I just have a soft, dry brush. Now, I don't want to get stenciling down in here, and I've got my painter's pal. If you want to use masking tape, that's fine too. But I'm just going to put this over the area that I don't want to get paint on. And I know me, I'm going to tape it down because I will have a problem if I don't. and just very lightly, kind of a circle. I'm going to wipe a little more off. Very light touch. I'm just going to move that painter's power around. Like I said, you can mask it off. And if you want to look at it, it's just a very soft design, hardly any at all. And it looks like when you're doing this, it is not even making a difference, but lift it up and peek underneath. And it's just exactly what it needs, just a little bit of a design. I see a little place I missed. Just like that. I did get a little bit down here that I shouldn't have. Go back there and just gonna kind of get that off of there. Take it off while it's still wet. And I am using my Mono Zero eraser to get that off of there. If you dampen it, it will remove wet paint. It will remove dry paint. This is my favorite little helper friend. Now, if you put your design on there and it's a little darker than what you prefer, I'll try this just a little bit. And I'm thinking, oh, it shouldn't be that dark. I can go back with a little bit of sandpaper and just lightly buff over it while it's not completely dry. You can also use a damp paper towel, but you don't want to dig into that background, so take it easy. You can always go back and distress that design should it be too dark. However, by the time you add all the shading all around it, it's going to be fine. It's going to take a minute to wipe my stencil off so that I don't have buildup. All right, so we've got our hat design on there. Let's go back to the face. I always think when you paint something with a face on it, it's always good to get the little face finished right off the bat. That way you have somebody, a little painting partner that you can paint the project with. So I am going to go in and I'm not going to do anything but just trace the eyes on right now. And your face should be dry enough now we can get that in there. And I am just doing the outside shape of the eyes. Yeah, it's here. I know it's here somewhere. I just used it. That's okay. I'll use the pencil. All right, so we know where the eyes are going to go. Let's get a little bit of shading on that to start with. All of the colors that are used in this project today are the DecoArt preferred colors, which means that these are the colors that DecoArt is continuing to make at this time. And I decided what I wanted to do is paint a project that used colors that would be available no matter what. So these, out of all the 300 and some colors, these are part of the 50 some that DecoArt is currently producing. hopefully after the first of the year, they will get the green light. And this is all comes from the governor of Kentucky. They've been on a, they're not, what is that called? They're not an essential business. So they are not allowed to work at full steam. So I think we should all write a letter to the governor of Kentucky and let him know how essential these paints are to our lifestyle. You think that might change his mind? I'm not real sure. Okay, so I have dried clay. All of the colors we're using today are part of that preferred paint colors, except for dried clay. And I'd love this color for the shading on the skin tone. I am loading my 1/2 inch angle. I do like to work with a bigger brush. And I'm just going to put a little bit of shading underneath his hat. And I know his hair is going to be there, but we still want to get a nice undertone. Starting away, and then I just let my brush walk it up to the bottom of the hat and create that shadowing. Now his ears have that little inside, and my brush is too big for that shading inside the ear. So I'm going to switch over to my 1/4 inch or a 3/8 inch angle would work really well. And this is just like a little kidney shape, half of a kidney shape. Make sure his little ears stay pointed, but I just go in there and put that little, follow that curve and around. Don't make this too hard. It's just a little half a kidney shape. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. So we can do that little inside of his ear. And then we want to make sure that his ears kind of have that little place right beside the earlobe. So I'm going to start up there. I went back to my 1/2 inch angle, and I can make that ear kind of set back in his, off the side of his face. And it makes it a little more elongated. And we'll just go ahead and do a little bit there at the bottom of his chin, all the way across his face and up to the other side of his ear. Now make sure that you have enough moisture on your brush, and I'll probably say this 100 times today, but having your brush loaded correctly is just really going to help you float that paint very easily, help you blend it in, gives you more open time to move it around and really make it look nice and smooth. And you won't need to use a mop so much, and you won't need to go back and blend and blend and blend. Just have that moisture on your brush and let the brush do all the work for you. Okay, let's keep working with that same color. I am going to go back to my 1/4 inch angle just so I have a little more control. What I want to do is create a little bit of shadowing around his eye. And we'll do a double shadow at the top to create that lid. And I'll show you how we do that. I do want to have a little bit underneath, but I want you to do this with caution. If it's too heavy, it makes it look like he has bags under his eyes and he looks really tired and a little bit ill. So keep the shading under his eye just a little softer. And then we'll go around the top part on both sides. And if you want to create that eyelid right here at the top, just make another little kind of a half moon right above that, so that you get that look of an eyelid up there. So we go all the way around it with the dried clay. Have plenty of moisture on your brush so you can move that paint. And then go back and do that second one. Just a little bit of a float, just right above that to create that eyelid. I'm having trouble with this second one. Okay. Just gives that look that he's got just a little bit of an eyelid up there.
Can you zoom in a bit, please?
Okay. There we go. Next, I'm going to give him the, it's called the elf zombie eye. We're just going to paint it white. And I am using my number 5 radical round. I like it really well because it has a nice fat body on it. And it has a nice sharp point, so I can really get those nice details. And then I can fill it in nice and smoothly. It's probably going to take a couple coats. You know how white is. I was watching Buddy on, I don't know what, some kind of holiday thing they've got on, but Buddy the cake guy, and he did an elf, and his eyes were almost identical to these. He had that little point on the end of them. He said, you can't do an elf unless you have that little point on it. So make sure you get this little point on the end. It gives him the elfin look. Okay, we'll let those dry. Grab your 1/4 inch angle. Well, we got the white paint out, and we're going to go back and highlight these ears. Elves have these pointy ears, and I want to put a little bit of a highlight on the tips of them just to kind of enhance that highlight. And that way it really makes those pointy ears kind of stand out. Get a little bit right here on this curved part. And a little bit on the other side right there.
Doris Jean wants to know, what do elves learn in school?
How to make toys. They're zooming right now. I don't know.
Watch Elf the movie.
Yeah. Oh, Lindsay said watch Elf the movie.
with Will Ferrell.
Will Ferrell, yeah.
He goes with Elf School.
I put a little bit down there at the bottom of the ears too. And what this does, it just kind of adds a little bit of dimension down there.
Oh, it was a joke. What do elves learn in school? The alphabet.
Alphabet. Oh,
Boo.
I like that. I have just a little bit of that dried clay. The ears on this outside just need a hint of color. And this is where you can kind of dabble a little bit. Put a little bit of shading right there on the outside. What a difference that makes. A little bit of paint makes a big difference. I'll probably tell you that 100 times today too. We'll just get a little bit on the outside of that curve. And I am going to do it on the outside of these ears too. And on that bottom part, any place that it would be a little shadowed. And that stops them from looking flat. I'll put a little more up here. Oh, look at those little ears. They're really looking good. All righty, let's go back to the eyes. And I think we're ready to put a second coat. I'm going to dry it just a bit. Again, light coats, you don't need a real heavy amount of paint. You just want to make sure that it's on there smoothly and evenly. And if your brush is loaded correctly, I was able to paint both of the eyes, get a nice smooth base coat without reloading. Very important how your brush is loaded. And I usually tell this story every time I teach. I was at a show and our booth was right next to Priscilla Hauser's booth. And she was painting roses. And I was kind of amazed, not at the roses, because I've seen her beautiful roses before and they're just spectacular. But I was more so amazed the fact that she was able to paint these roses, a complete rose, with only one load of paint on her brush. I thought, oh my gosh, how does she do that? And I said, Priscilla, how do you paint an entire rose without reloading your brush? And she said, feel my brush. And it was heavy. Her brush was so heavy. And a couple times when I watched her as she painted, and her brush just kind of glides across the surface. And she said, if your brush is loaded correctly, you can paint the entire alphabet. Well, I wasn't real sold on the entire alphabet thing, or in this case, the alphabet. Wonk, wonk. Anyways, but I did go home and I pondered that quite a bit. And I did realize that I was not loading my brush correctly. And so if you're just getting a little dink of paint on the tip of your brush and then you paint a little bit and then you get a little dink of paint, you know, you're working way, way, way too hard. Load your brush well, get enough water on it that it's going to flow, and let your brush do all of the work. If you have a nice big brush, you should be able to get a significant amount of paint on that brush and cover a good area. It will not only take less time, create less work on your end, but the end results are going to be smoother. You're going to have more continuity. And by far, I can look back before Priscilla and after Priscilla and see a significant difference in the results of my painting. Just look so much better. So I encourage you not only to load your brush correctly, but pay attention to how you're holding your brush. If you are strangling your brush and gripping it, and I know the harder you concentrate, it's so easy to, you know, the harder you grip your brush. Have a light, loose grip on your brush. And I noticed when Priscilla was painting, a couple of times the brush fell out of her hand because she had such a delicate hold on her brush. So the correct amount of paint and loosen your hand and just let it just kind of glide. Okay, that's a lesson from Priscilla, but very, very important. Okay, let your eyes dry. Let's go ahead and put that little nose in there. If you need to trace it on, that's fine. I'm just going to use my 1/4 inch angle, and I'm loading the toe of it with the dried clay. And the way I do it, I put like a little bit of paint this way and a little bit of paint that way, and kind of float that nose on there. It's just an oval. But it has to be around. I have a really difficult time with shapes because of the contacts I wear. So sometimes it's hard for me to get a round or a perfect shape. I can see that it's not, but I struggle with achieving that. So if you have trouble with circles, you need to get a circle stencil, a template. Where did my template go? Something with circles and ovals. I could have even put this down and just floated around that. Gosh, that's pretty close. I did all right. So just keep it simple. Don't try to make it hard to do that. And then of course he's going to have that little bridge coming down. So it's just the hint of the nose that you want to add on at this point. Give that little face time to dry here. Are we ready to get those little eyes in there? I think they feel pretty dry. To get the eyes in there, I have a cheat method that I do, and I'm using my painter's palette. Actually, I'm using 2 of them. And what I do is I line, let's go with this one. I line it up, and can you see how the circle is bigger than the eye itself? So to fix that, I'm going to tape that down, and I'm going to take another one, go here, and I'm going to shift it down so that it covers to the bottom of the eyelid. So the first stencil is going to create the entire eyeball. The second template is just going to mask off the eyelid. Does that make sense? So I'm going to put this on here. And I have the eyeball just hitting the bottom of the eye area. But you can see, let me go in just a little bit closer here. I created this painter's template because I wear contacts, and I have one for distance and one for close up. So when it comes to doing something like a round circle, I struggle. So I'm always looking for ways to make that easier. So I've got the round template down, and then I can just take this and I'm going to cover up the eyelid area. And we're using Hauser light green. And my stencil brush. I'm going to have to clean it out because I have purple in it. Get that really cleaned out. And that's one thing nice about my stencil brushes. You don't have to wait until they dry. You can wash them out and go right to the next color. All right, so I've got my Hauser light green, and I'm just going to stencil that eyeball. And this will mask off the top, and that masks off the bottom. So I have my little eye. Got just a touch there. I need to touch up. And we'll do the same thing on this eye. Put that on there, and I want to mask off that top eyelid and stencil that eyeball. For me, that is so much easier than trying to paint around because I know I will have trouble. Cover that up just a little. We're going to hop around just a little bit. Let's go ahead and put his little mouth on there. And I am using my Epic 18-aught script liner. And
sorry, there's a question.
yes.
So you're using 2 painter's pals for the eyes. How do those of us that have 1 do it?
What you can do with 1 is just paint the bottom part and then shift it down and paint the top part. So you can do the bottom, or you can take some tape, like tape for curves, and mask it off. I was wondering, sometimes if you have any other stencil that has circles on it, you could also use that. So anything with a circle would work. And there's a lot of, I think if you look around, you might see that you have things with circles on them. You just need that rounded shape. Okay, the mouth, we're just going to do lamp black and a little smile on there. Oop. He's got a bigger smile on one side than the other. There we go. So we've got your Epic script liner and lamp black loaded up. We're going to do a couple things with it. We're going to go paint. While you've got that black on your brush, just go ahead and put some little bit of eyeliner along the top of the eyes with that black. If your brush is loaded correctly, you should be able to paint all of that without stopping. And he needs a few little eyelashes as well, no more than 3. Oh, he's starting to look kind of happy, isn't he? And I am kind of jumping around the eye because it needs to dry before we go to the next step. So we don't want to kind of muddy it up. And I think that green area should be getting dry by now. I do spend a lot of time on the eyes because I think especially with this project, people look at the eyes and you want the eyes to really sparkle and shine and to be a focal point. Anything that has a face on it, when someone looks at it, they almost intuitively look at the eyes because they want to have that connection. Let's add a little shading in the eyes. And I have my 1/8 inch awesome angle. And I designed this so it would have a longer length on the bristles so that it would give a longer stroke before you have to reload. And I'm dampening it. I want to pick up just a little bit of forest green on the toe of my brush. And I want to shade around the outer edges of the eye to give a little bit of darker color in there. And I'm going to shade it right up all the way around. So it's going around the bottom and around the top as well. And if you have enough water in your brush, you'll really be able to push that paint around, blend it and soften it so that it is nice and soft. Okay, because we're jumping around, going back to dried clay and my 1/4 inch angle, want to put a little bit of a shadow below the mouth, just a soft float with a hint of color. This is going to help make the mouth look like it's not sitting on his face, but it's part of his face. Here we go. And that gives a nice little shade there. Put a little bit under his nose too. Make sure that is dry. We're going to go back inside of his eyes. We want to paint the pupils. Now his pupils need to be centered in his eye. Remember, his eye shifted up a little bit under his eyelid. So you want to make sure that you get that nice and even around. Use the bottom part of the eye to center the pupil. And this one, let's go. This one is the 3rd circle over. And you can see how it's even around the bottom. I'm not so worried about the top. That's fine where it's at. Actually, I'm going to go down just a size. I'm doing the 4th one over. I want a little more of the green showing above my eye. And I do always tape it down because I don't want it to shift on me. Using lamp black as the color, even though I'm not doing anything else. I always get the excess off of my brush because I don't want it to run under. If you want nice crisp edges, get that excess off of your brush. And when you stencil, just pounce down. Don't push it underneath of the stencil. To make it easier to see through the stencil, I'm going to wipe it off when I do my second one. And get that in there. And we are spending a lot of time on the eyes, but I really think this is important to get the eyes just really bright. I think we're going to have to jump around. We'll let that dry for a minute. We like hopping around. That way you won't get bored. We ready to move on? Okay. I see some thumbs up. We're good. Let's go ahead and put some cheeks on. And I am using alizarin crimson. If you use the red, it becomes almost too garish. And the alizarin crimson has a little more of a purple tone to it. So on top of the flesh tone, it just resonates kind of a nice rosy pink instead of a hot pink kind of look. Another paper towel here. The cheeks, I want to make sure that they are nice and soft and blushy. Get all the moisture out of my brush. Gonna load it well. Oops. Find where I'm at on camera here. Loading it well, working that paint into the bristles. I don't have much on the tip of the brush, but it's in the brush. So make sure that the tips, even though it doesn't look like much is there, I want to wipe that excess off. This is a real strong color. We don't want him to look like he's an elf on the town or that he's had a hard night. We want to just give him a soft blush. So if I do a circle for the cheeks, it makes it look, sometimes you get that hollow center in the middle like a tornado. So I am just going to take and do a little, see, that's still too dark. Little soft, still too dark. I'll tell you. Let's try it again. Okay, I'm just kind of doing like an X. Hopefully I can soften that up. If I want both cheeks to look the same, I work on them both at the same time. So I don't do one and then do the other. I work a little bit on one side, work on the other side. That way you build them up together at the same time. Here we go. And it just takes patience. I'm gonna make sure. Now that I know where the center is, I can start working in a circle around it and build that up. And it just takes patience. You want to just let that color kind of evolve on its own. Mine's a little go. It's not as bright as it looks, a little bit darker. I do want him to have rosy cheeks, but I don't want him to be real bright. And then I want to bring some of that color on his nose. So I have just a little bit of that alizarin crimson. I'm gonna blush the bottom of his nose, just a touch, so that he has some rosiness on his nose as well. And hopefully it's not as bright on my piece as it looks on the camera, so. I was showing Lindsay, she said, how do you paint really tiny stuff? I had done a piece and I said, oh my goodness, if I showed you a close-up, you would think it was absolutely hideous. So I zoomed in on it. She goes, oh my gosh, that's awful. And I said, when you're working with small detail, when you zoom in on it, you really see everything that you maybe don't want to see. So when you step away, that's when everything comes together. And that's where you need to look. Instead of keeping your nose real close to it, you need to kind of step away and see where it needs to be adjusted, because often I think we overwork things and work too hard in some areas that aren't necessary. Okay, let's go back to the eyes. They should be dry by now. I've got my Awesome Angle and Snow White. And I'm gonna float a highlight and paint a highlight both at the same time, or not at the same time, but with the Snow White. Float just a little bit along this bottom right side of the eye, just a little bit, not much, just a little highlight. Gonna swish a little bit up here on the top left of his eye. Not a lot, because we're going to go back after we get just a little float here on the bottom right of each eye and a little float in the top left of the pupil. Going to go back with the script liner, the 18-aught Epic script liner, and I'm going to pull a line right there on the bottom of each eye. And you can put a little sparkle in there. Okay. And then up here in the top left of the pupil, a little dot and pull it down. Little dot and pull it down. It makes it look kind of wet if it's not perfect. Don't overdo it. Just put it in there and walk away. And I think probably the next step we do with the eyes is what really makes a huge difference. I am just going to, I don't have much green on this left or right eye. What I did, I looked at my eye, it just need a little more darkness in it. So I went back with my forest green, just reinforce that bottom edge of the iris. Let's put this little guy's hair on. He looks kind of bold. Okay, this might be Senior Elf, I don't know. And we're using honey brown, and I've got my number 5 radical round. The hair is going to be done in layers. So the first layer is just going to be like all the other layers we've done. We're just going to lay it in there, and then we can go back, build upon that. I've got just a little bit more. Honey brown's kind of our medium color. We'll put a few little highlights in, and we have the darker brown shading. So this is just the base coat on where we're going to put the hair in. And you can trace the pattern on, or you can kind of wing it. That's up to you. One thing nice about elf hair, it's not real fussy. I do know that. I talk to them. Okay, so we'll have some shagginess coming down. We've got this little curl that comes around. Little point. And he has pretty good sideburns. Well, maybe they're not sideburns. I don't know what they are. Now, if there's any part of the ear you're not crazy about, that's where you put a little bit of hair. But everything comes out from underneath the hat, so you don't need to be too perfect up here. I am running a line across. You want to make sure that the length of the hair on both sides is fairly equivalent. You don't want one side real short and one side real long. And then he's got kind of a little wave thing going on here. And one thing nice about this radical round, you can kind of get that shaggy look. I think I'm going to bring this down just a little bit longer on the sides. Just kind of fluff that on there. After you get that on there, I'm going back with the milk chocolate. I'm just going to stay up on the toe of my brush and just brush some more strokes down through there. This is where you start to get a little bit of color in your hair. And it's going to start to thicken it up a little bit. You don't want to cover up that golden brown or honey brown. You just want to bring in some more of those little hairlines. And I'm working rather quickly. I'm not being too particularly fussy. Just putting some more strokes on there. Not too worried about getting right up to the top of that brim. We're going to go back and shade that so I can go back and clean all that up. Again, make sure you have enough water in your brush that you're able to flow this on very smoothly. If your brush is dragging, you need just a little more water to get that paint flowing. And get that nice coverage. Oh, that looks cute. While you're in the burnt umber, grab your 18-aught script liner, get some little eyebrows on that guy. It's amazing what eyebrows do. Oh my goodness. I'll let you catch up just a second here. We're going to go back and just kind of touch up a few things and finish up so that we can go back to the hair, get it finished up, and then we can, I think we'll be finished with the face. Any questions so far? All right, let's grab a little bit of the dried clay. And we have shaded below the eyes, the mouth. We need to also shade just a little bit below the eyebrows. So I've got my 18-aught, eighth inch, oh my goodness, 1/8 inch angle shading dried clay right below the eyebrows. It just helps give more of that forehead look. And I think give a little bit of a highlight on those eyebrows. I have a little bit of Snow White just to highlight that just a touch, just make them stand out a little bit more. So dried clay below the eyebrows, a little teeny highlight of Snow White on top of the eyebrows. Going back into Snow White and put a little highlight on the nose. Top left of the nose. Highlight that. And I just did a little highlight with a float of Snow White, but I'm going to go in with my Epic script liner and put a big highlight on there. Really want that to kind of sparkle. Need some highlights on his cheeks. So just using my stylus to add a few little sparkles on his cheek. I always do a little cluster of 3. I think it adds some whimsy. I just think that looks cute. So we've done his eyebrows. We've had some highlights on his nose, a little bit on his cheeks. Now, we need to go back to his eyes, and I think this makes such a huge difference. Can you see the difference between his eyes, how it has this little shading inside the eye, huge difference. It takes it from flat and plain and gives it such dimension. And I'm using my 1/8 inch angle in lamp black. Now be careful, this lamp black is such a strong color. Just need a little bit of it. So you're going to have more water than anything else. And I'm just going to take my angle brush and I'm going to float. Let me zoom in just a little bit more. My little fob here keeps getting covered up. Oh, he's so cute. Alrighty, so I'm just going to float right under the eyelid. That's too strong, so I need a little more water. There we go. Just right over top of the eye. A little more pink. And just float it right down the other side. This one step is huge. It just adds so much. We'll do the same thing over here. Very soft. Now you can always go back and add more, so don't overdo it the first time. If you're nervous about doing it, we can always go back and add more. What a huge transformation just that little float adds. Absolutely huge. This is probably the most exciting thing we've done for his little face, is adding that little float on the eye. Just amazing what it does. We are going to go back to the hair and see up here where I said it was kind of messy and I wasn't worried about that. Going in with burnt umber, and I've got my 1/2 inch angle. Let me go out just a touch more. Okay, so I've got my angle. I'm loading the toe of it with burnt umber. And what I want to do is not get in my cheeks here. I'm going to shade along the top with the burnt umber, but I don't like it straight across. So I'm going to shade across and then I'm going to pull it down so that I can drag that shaded. And you can even bring it all the way down in some areas. But see how that fills this area in right here? We're going across and then pull it down. And here I want to just kind of keep that curve. So just go with how the hair goes.
Bonnie says it's a really cute face.
Thank you. He just looked really, I don't do eyes like this very often. I usually do the dip dot eyes, but I wanted to do something with a little bit of a, he looks kind of mischievous in a good way. And we haven't added any highlights in our hair yet, so we'll go back and do that. Just want to get this shadowing in there. If you do get on the white, you can go back and clean it up, but it's so much easier now just to kind of wipe it off. So see how that's up against the brim? All of a sudden it looks really nice. And then we need to add highlights. So I've got my number 5 Radical Round. I put a little bit of that milk chocolate in it just to keep it a little on the dirty side and just pick up a little bit of Snow White. And I don't think, let me go darker. Yeah, you can see how my brush is a little bit muddy with that white on it. And then I can just go in and add a few little highlights, not a lot. Get enough, a little more water on my brush. And I'm not going to take my highlights up into his hair. Brighten it up a little bit. I want it to be darker up there underneath his hat. But I can add a few, just stay on the toe of your brush. And I know they look a little bright at this point, but I know when they dry, they're not going to be quite as strong. Add a little highlights. He looks very merry, doesn't he? He's looking great. That was the hard part. We're on the downhill slide now. Now you got that cute little face staring back at you. I know you're going to have to finish it. There's just no doubt in my mind. All righty. Let's go back to this little hat at the top here. And we need to add some shadowing on that. We're going to do the hat, and then we'll do the brim and the collar, and then we'll add the jingle bells. So I am going back to alizarin crimson, which is what we did his cheeks with alizarin. Got my 1/2 inch angle, and I am going to shade above all these pointy things, and then also on both sides of the tail. And the reason is my light comes from the top left. So this top area is going to be my highlight area. Over here is my shadow area, but this is also underneath. So it'll be heavier on the right side than on the bottom, but we still want some shading there. This is so pretty. It's going to really pull that dioxazine purple into the hat, make it kind of pull it all together. I have a lot of water on my brush so I can move that paint around and blend it in. I do want the big part of this crown to have a lot of shading on it. It's a pretty red, but it needs to be toned down quite a bit. And I'm going to shade on this side, across the top of that jingle bell, and then up this right side pretty heavy. Probably just kind of blend it out where that little turn is. Okay, while we're waiting for that to dry, we're going to jump around a little bit more. Let's go ahead and...
What color is that again?
The alizarin crimson is the shading color. I need to base coat this brim, and I'm using my 3/4 inch angle. I don't know if that's going to be too big or not. I will find out. I like using big brushes. Yeah, it's probably a little big. I've got red in my brush, not a good combination. I was trying to save time with that 3/4 inch angle, and I think it's taking more time. So just do a quick base coat with that Hauser light green, and then also down here on the collar. You get that base coated, and I'll try to straighten up here just a little bit. You know how you paint, everything kind of encroaches in on where you're painting, and pretty soon you have no space. All right, we get one base coat on that. We're going to set him aside and work on the twist for a moment. We'll just kind of jump back and forth. Somebody got green paint on mine. I'm not sure how that happened. Imagine I got paint on something that wasn't supposed to have paint on it. You never do that, do you? Okay, let's go on down to the twisty piece. And I want to add that background stenciling on here. Anytime that you have a plain piece, just a little bit of design just really makes a huge difference. And whether it's a stamp design, a stencil design, you know, we have so many options. Even decoupaging a decorative paper is huge and is so very impressive when it comes to the finished piece. So I wanted to add a subtle color onto the twist. And I'm going to be using honey brown, and that was the base color on his hair. Now we don't want this really strong. This is just subtle. The problem is if the background stenciling becomes too strong and intense, it kind of competes with all these other designs and it becomes so busy that it's kind of confusing to look at. So you want to keep this background stenciling just very soft and just a hint of color. I am using honey brown. And again, I'm working the paint into my stencil brush so that I have a lot of paint in the brush, but not a lot on the tips. And that way I can go quite a bit before reloading, but it won't be so heavy on my brush. Even still, I'm going to clean my brush on a paper towel because I want this to be very soft and just a light touch. Now, my stencil doesn't fit on my ribbon, but the ribbon flows this way. So I'm going to flow this way with my stencil as well. And I'm just going to anchor it down with, I always use tape. I think I'll move it down just a little bit. Kind of pay attention to where the design is. Again, you don't want, you know, there's some blank areas. I'll just let it be mostly design. I have a very light touch. Just going to do the circle thing until I start to see a little bit of a design underneath. This is kind of relaxing. After painting little faces and eyes, this is our break time. If you're not sure, lift it up because it's not going to take much to give a really soft design. Now down here where I'm going to have to connect the two, I'm not too fussy about that, but I'm not going to do a partial. I'm just going to stop it kind of there and then move my stencil down and kind of go from there. This design is so subtle that it really won't matter. And if you're not sure, lift it up and see how it's hooking up together. And I believe I did on a couple of these. If there was an empty spot, you just go back and take one of these little curly Q sections and just add it to that empty spot. And this one, I just turned the stencil a long way so I could get all of it in the last portion. I just think this is such a simple way to add impressive design. And you can't tell that this was done in segments. Like up here where there's a little place missing, I could just go in and add a little curl right in that spot and nobody knows. So, you know, the stencils are very flexible, so you don't have to do exactly what's in front of you, but you can add more to it, shift it around, create kind of amazing designs with just one stencil. Plus we have all that shading to put on there. So there's a lot that's going to be going into this. It really dresses it up, doesn't it? I just think, you know, we can do such a little bit of paint makes such a big difference. And we can do so many things so very easily with the different tools that we have at hand that just make such a huge difference. Once you get finished with that, need to go back and add the second coat on his green on his hat. So we'll just go ahead, when you finish that up, jump back in there to that Hauser light and put the second coat on his brim of his hat and on the collar on his below his face. And with this second coat, you should be able to smooth it out and get a nice coverage. Yeah, definitely need a 1/2 inch angle as opposed to the 3/4. Make sure that you go right down to the top of his hairline as well. I had a little bit of a white area sticking out there. What a difference. And I think the second coat should do pretty good on this.
Did you use white highlights on his hair?
I did. It was on a dirty brush. I used my Radical Round, had a little bit of brown in it, and I just went right into the white. So it's not a stark white, it's more of a dirty white. I think every time I start a class, I always introduce myself, and I didn't do that today. So hi, I'm Chris Hoy. And it's pronounced Hoy, like joy, like toy, like boy. I am the owner and founder of Cupboard Distributing, CD Stencils, Pixelated Palette, and the Scrapbook Outlet. I do designing, teaching, run the business. And probably out of everything I do, I like teaching about the best. No matter how many times I paint, I always am so impressed at what a little bit of paint does and how we can take a little bit of shading and a little bit of highlighting and what it does when you add it. And I think that is probably what the magic of decorative painting is all about, when we can add our touches, and it doesn't have to be too limited to just decorative painting. I know there's been things around the house that we had a brick chimney. We had our kitchen remodeled and found this beautiful brick chimney, but it had soot running down it from where the old cook stove was hooked up. And the contractor tried to remove the soot, and he couldn't get it off of there. And I said, don't worry about it, I can paint it. And he said, oh, I don't know, that may not look very good. And so he left, and that night I got out my paints, and I'm telling you what, I matched all those colors up and painted those bricks. And he came back the next day and he wanted to know if I was for hire. He said, you can't even tell. And I said, I told you it would be fine. So, you know, we can do about anything. We decorative painters are awesome.
Someone wants to know what they can substitute for dried clay.
For dried clay, just mix a little bit of alizarin crimson with the flesh tone. And that should give you a nice kind of a shading color. Or if you have shading flesh from days gone by.
Bonnie says Zoom has kind of spoiled us. She hopes it continues even after COVID.
You know, I do think, and tell me if I'm wrong, I think if we would have tried to sell the idea of Zoom a year ago before all this happened, I don't know about you guys, but I'm sure I would have said, nah, it's not going to work. And I think that we have really, and I'm proud of all of us. I mean, look at what we're doing. We are connecting via technology with Zoom and doing what we love. And I think our industry is becoming stronger because of it. And how many people are not able to travel to conventions, are not able to travel to classes? Um, that way they can still be part of the painting group. So to me, it's just truly amazing that the opportunities that Zoom has provided us.
Bonnie says we have adapted well.
We are true baby Zoomers, I'll tell you. We have, but how many of you would have tried this if we didn't have COVID going on? If you didn't have any other choice, would you really have tried it? I think some of you would, but I'm not sure I would have been a hard sell. So yay for us. We can sit and paint in our jammies and nobody will know.
We're in our jammies now, aren't we, Chris?
Yeah, we're in, no. We are not in our jammies now. Lindsay and I are in here painting, and the rest of them are out there doing inventory. I told them they could have the week after Christmas off if inventory got done before Christmas. Need I say more? It will be done. Nobody wants to come back after Christmas. We all like that long break.
Because I want to sit in my jammies every
Yeah,
day.
Lindsay wants to sit in her jammies all day. Got a little bit of a spot here I need to clean up. After we get the second coat on the hat and the brim, or the brim and the collar, we're going to go back to the top of the hat and get that finished up. Okay. I was debating when I did design this, I was going to give him little blue eyes, but I wanted to keep the color palette kind of minimal. Sometimes I think that is just a little more, it gives you more, it's a little more cohesive. And I thought if he had blue eyes, I don't know, it just seemed like they didn't quite fit in. I don't know that I've done green eyes on Christmas. I've done green eyes on things on Halloween, but I thought he would do well with green eyes. And I think it did turn out very well. And I'm noticing here, there's a line between the collar and the bottom of his chin that's a little bit white. So I'm just going to go back with that shading flush, just to kind of clean that up a little bit. And then when I get ready to do his collar, I can do the bottom side. But yeah, that just needed a little bit more shading in there. All right, let's go back to the hat. And the one color that we're going to reinforce over and over is that dioxazine purple. And usually when I do a project, I like to use a dark connecting thread that I repeat in all of the elements. Payne's gray is one of my favorite colors. Black plum's one of my favorite colors. Deep midnight green. But the problem with this, I was trying to stick with the preferred palette that DecoArt is currently producing. They don't have those colors. So they did have dioxazine purple, and I wondered, that's not it. I wondered how that would look with green and red, and it worked out really well. So we're going to go back with that dioxazine purple and just deepen the shading on the hat.
Chris, real quick.
Yes.
Someone wanted to know if you were going to do blue eyes, what shades would you use?
When I do blue eyes, I like that, like the Salem blues or the aqua blues, not just a plain blue. I like a little bit of that turquoise tint to it because I think that's very intriguing when you have a little bit of that turquoise blue hue in the eyes. It just seems to sparkle and draw you in a little bit more than just a plain blue. Actually, I have my color chart here. I would use probably, oh, the Bahama blues would be pretty. And they have so many pretty new turquoises. Desert turquoise would be pretty. And that the turquoise blue. But to me, these turquoise colors are a little more vibrant than just the plain blues. If you don't have this chart downloaded from DecoArt, it's a really good reference for, and you could put a little star beside of the colors that maybe that you have or don't have, the colors that are available or not available. It just makes an easy reference. And it's free. DecoArt has it on their website.
I'll put the link up there in the chat.
Oh, okay. Lindsay's going to put that link up there. Alrighty, so I've got some of this dioxazine purple. And I'm going to load it on the toe of my 1/2 inch angle. This is a color just like Payne's Gray, a black plum, soft black. It's a very strong color. So I guess basically take it easy. Don't let it overpower, but it is a beautiful shade color. So, and what it will also do, it's going to pull that back stenciling that we did. It's going to help pull that in, soften it down, and pull that all together as well. Now remember I said our shading or highlights are coming from the left side. So this right side will be just a little bit darker. And I'm bringing my shading up so that it's not just around all the points, but it's up behind those points. So I can do the right side of the tail, and I want to do both sides. Remember how we said this is going to be shaded down here and then also on this side. But I want to keep that middle just a little bit light. So don't let that lose that middle out. And if you look at that hat now with that subtle design behind it, now that we've added that same shade color in there, really pulls it together, tones that design down. It's not quite so, there's not so much contrast that it really jumps out at you. It just kind of blends in. I want to add just a hint of highlight up there too. I didn't bring an oval dry brush, works really well. I don't have one, so I'm going to use my stencil brush and just Snow White, kind of wipe most of it off. I might need to go a little bit bigger. I think I will. Oh, my stencil brush still has red in it. Just want to put a little bit of a highlight up there. Just to give a little bit of a brightness on that. Okay, so we've got the top part of the hat finished. We've got the face finished. We need to go in and get this brim and the collar, work on it. And it has that little star sparkle in the background. Again, if you didn't get the stencil, you can use anything with a design on it. What you want to do and keep in mind is it's just the rule of fashion and home decor. You can put stripes and plaids together, but they have to be different sizes. So if you've got a big design up here, you need to keep the design on the brim and the collar a little smaller, or so they're not too much the same, and then it becomes very confusing.
Someone asked what the color with the highlight was on the hat.
Snow white, just a soft dry brush of snow white. We need to add these little stars, and I'm going to be using forest green. Again, they're not real solid. It's just kind of a dry brush design on there. Doesn't take much to give them a highlight. But let me see, maybe we need to put that, speaking of highlights, add the highlights in there first. Okay. No, I didn't. Let's see. Yep, we'll highlight it first. I thought, you know, if we put this over top of the, or put the highlights over top, it's going to change the intensity of the stars. Okay. We're all on the same page together now. Citron green. That's another color I never used before COVID. A lot of these colors I never used. And I was a little bit miffed that DecoArt discontinued some of my I was a little bit miffed that DecoArt was not making some of my very favorite colors, because all along I thought DecoArt was working for me and me alone. So I found out differently that DecoArt picked the colors they picked based on their sales. So that's why they picked what they did. So as a result, it kind of forces us to use colors maybe we're not really familiar with, which is not a bad thing, because I found out, and I actually did tell DecoArt, that I use colors that I think I favor over what I have been using. So sometimes it's really good to get out of your comfort zone and try different things, because, and I know it's happened before when they've discontinued colors, that I've been forced to pick a new favorite, and it ended up being okay. So I'm kind of like rolling with whatever now. You know, we are decorative painters. If we can't get this color green, then we'll try something else. So, you know, we'll make it work. So I've got citron green. I want to highlight the top of these little points. I have my 1/2 inch angle. I just really want to brighten those up. Like I said, I wasn't sure I was a fan of citron green, but it really adds a lot of nice brightness. And I think I like the way it looks really well. You can't tell me this is kind of an icky color. If you've got citron green, do you agree with me? It's just not a go-to color. But when you put it over top of this Hauser light, they just really play well together. Remember to put enough water on your brush that you can move that paint around. Now over here under this jingle bell, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. It's going to be a little bit darker. So I'm not going to put much highlights there. I'm going to do this left side, and I'm going to leave the right side and underneath a little bit darker. Now down here on the collar, I'm going to have this left side is going to be highlighted, and then the bottom of the tips under his face is going to be a little bit shadowed. But I will go ahead and put some highlights on the left side, and we'll bring them down each one and blend that out. The citron green, I believe it has a lot of, it leans a little bit more toward being translucent, which means that it's whatever's underneath of it's going to kind of show through. So you're going to get not a real heavy coverage, and that it's just going to highlight that Hauser light green. It looks really pretty. I'll put just a little bit over here. One of my favorite browns is light cinnamon, but they that one was not being produced during this time. So milk chocolate is very similar, and it's beautiful. I've really never used milk chocolate. I eat milk chocolate, but I don't paint with it. So now I know if something comes up and I run out of light cinnamon, I'm good with the milk chocolate. It's still just as beautiful. Okay, let's move on and get a little shading on this. We're going to use the forest green to add our shading. This is where it starts to look really pretty. This forest green, I'm a plantation pine girl, but I found out forest green is a beautiful Christmas color. I have my 1/2 inch angle. I'm going to shade along the bottom and up the right side of the brim. And make sure you get enough water on there. And it's just so pretty. I'm kind of a tappy float kind of shader. I don't do straight lines. I kind of do a tap and a float. I kind of tap the paint in and then float it around. Or float it in and then tap it around. And I know underneath this bell's going to have a lot of shading there. So I can put some in there. Now we will go back and kind of reinforce the shading on the green as well. And then also we're going to do on the collar, it's below his chin. And then, explain this well. We've got it on the bottom and the right sides of these little points. Okay. On this, 1, 2, 3, on the 4th one over, I did the left side just because it needed it there. You know, that's the artistic license kind of thing. So I did the bottom and right side on all of them, except this 4th one, and I did the left side. So we'll go under his chin. you want to bring it down enough that it blends in and has enough presence, because this is actually that Christmas green that we're going for. And I just pull it down and blend it in. And if you want to have a mop, you can use that. So I'm going to go around the bells and the bottom side. Isn't that a pretty green with that Hauser light? Oh my goodness. Just very, very Christmassy. And if your brush has enough moisture in it, you can move that paint all over the place. And this right side as well. So basically the hat and the brim are forest green with these highlights on them. So that's what we want it to look like, that it's forest green with all this brightness. But we're doing it in these layers to kind of get it to resonate just a little bit more. If we start out with forest green and add these colors in, it's going to be way too dark. I think what we're going to do, since we have all these pretty greens out, we're going to jump down and work on the twist a little bit. And we can put these holly leaves on there. Okay, we got a plan here. You know, sometimes when you're in class, you want to stay consistent, but it's so much easier to jump around, and that way you're not sitting there looking at it waiting for the paint to dry. I think we should have show and tell at this point. Everybody want to hold your little faces up so we can see all those little happy smiles? Oh, Doris, I wondered what the heck yours was. White, you turned it over. It looks great. Oh, aren't they cute? Oh my goodness. Oh,
They're adorable.
they are darling. I don't see a bad one yet. They all look kind of pleasantly mischievous. Oh, those are great. Okay, well, we'll let put his little face to the side. We'll work on the twist for a little bit. All righty. So did everybody get the right side base coated so it goes in the right direction? Because when I did my other one, I had it backwards and I had to redo this one. So this little twist, it makes sense, but I don't know why. I have trouble when it comes to like flowing ribbon. I have to really think about where the curves are. So to make it easier for my mind to understand what's going on here, I put the shading on first so that I have my sections divided out. And you can trace the pattern on, but I can show you a real easy way to kind of do this with just a simple float. Let's start with a little bit of that honey brown. And I've got it loaded on the toe of my 1/2 inch angle. And I'm going to start right here at this point and just float around. So I've got this point and I know it's going to end there. So I can just take starting there and I'm going to go across and I'm wrapping it around. And that is that first fold. Okay, I don't do this, I do left to right, so I'm going to flip it upside down and I'm going to do the second one, which is right there. And I'm going to bring it around and twist it up. So it's straight across from that little crook and you just flip it up. So now we've got the first section and the second section. And this is where my little mind always gets mixed up. So we're going to start on the third one or whatever one this is. We're just going to go down. And I always want to do this the other way. Okay, so there's that one. And then start here. And then it starts to make sense. And the last one, I flipped it around, not to confuse everyone, but I wanted this part to be up. I guess I wanted the tail to be flipped in behind.
Can you move it up just a bit?
I think so. Let me go out just a little bit. Okay. And ta-da, now we have our flowing ribbon. Okay, now comes the fun part. We need to paint this little stripe on there. I'm using a Joe Sonia 5/0 script liner. Script liner is a little bit longer, so you get more of a stroke out of it. Okay, remember what Priscilla said. If your brush is loaded correctly, you can paint the entire stripe, right? So make sure you get plenty of water on that brush. Work it into the brush. Now, remember they old ruled, oh, don't get paint in your ferrule. Well, no, you don't want to get paint in your ferrule and let it dry, but it doesn't matter if it gets in there for the moment. So I really load my brush up. I have enough paint on there. I don't know if you could see. I have paint, a lot of paint in there, but I have not changed the integrity of the brush. I still have a nice long slender barrel.
Can you scoot it up just a smidge, please?
That
Someone can
was
see the very bottom.
the tricky bottom. Okay, so
What color is the stripe again?
this is true red. We want this to be a really pretty red. And this, just make sure when you do your stripe that you follow that little curve around. You want to make sure that, and if you want to, you can kind of bend it here. Now the paint. Okay, here's the part. If it's not bright enough red, you can always go back and add a second coat. And I know what you're thinking about, but once you get the first coat on, the second coat's not that bad.
Your head's getting in the camera.
I know.
Your hair looks good.
Thank you. You see my gray roots?
Nope.
And make sure when you do your striping that you keep even pressure on your brush so that that stripe maintains the same width all the way across. My daughter usually, and when she was in college, she would call me at night and she'd say, "What are you doing, Mom?" I said, "I'm painting." She said, "Okay." And one thing that I can't do when I paint is talk, or when I do line work, like little tiny lines, I can't talk. So Laura would say, she'd be telling me all this stuff and I'd be listening, but I couldn't answer her because I was like right in the middle of this little tiny line. And she said, "Mom, are you doing line work?" Crickets. She said, "Oh, Mom, you are doing line work." I said, "Yeah, I am." Yeah, I got my, whoops. And after all that, I did get my finger in it and smudge it. Now we are going to put holly leaves on here, but that's if you have a boo-boo area. We might take care of some of them, but I don't think it'll cover that one. Okay. I'll give you a minute to get your stripes on there, and then we will add the holly leaves after we get finished with our little elf face. I'll leave that there so you can look at it. Okay. Just a couple more minutes and then we'll go back to the elf head and we'll get those stars on his little brim and collar. How are we doing? We're doing pretty good for time. I always think we're doing really good for time and then all of a sudden it's like 15 minutes left and we're going, oh boy. Buckle up and zoom on. Maybe that's why they call it Zoom. I never thought about it. Okay, let's go back to his little hat. And I am using forest green. I'm going to add the stars on there. I want to load up my stencil brush. I don't want real heavy, so I'm wiping it off on my paper towel. All of this just needs to have a light touch to it. All righty, so when you put your stars on, you don't want, you want to make sure that your stars make sense on the brim. So you don't want a big star like falling off the edge. Little stars doesn't matter. So kind of being careful where my star placement is, so that I don't have any weird ones like going right to the edge or off the edge. And then I'm just going to do that real soft, kind of a dry brush. And be careful, you don't want to get these on the red area. And what I really love about this star stencil is if I think, well, that one didn't even show up. If I think, oh, I need a different star right there, I can go ahead and just put one star in and fill that area in. So you can add stars where you think it looks like it's a little bit bare. Pay attention to the edges. Don't get it on the red part. Right in here, I need another star, but I want a smaller one. So I'll put one right up there. And maybe one right in there. And see up here, this little itty bitty star, I think I want a bigger one there. So this is what's fun about the stencil. You can change it to whatever you want. And we'll put one right up in here. And see how I took the stars and just kind of filled in different areas. I'll do the same thing down here on his collar. And just stencil those in. Again, I see a lot of empty spaces, so I'll just go back and put something in right there to kind of fill it in. I use this stencil a lot. It's kind of a fun little filler stencil. I've done night skies with it. And then also some Halloween pieces. So it just really adds a little bit of design to that. Very quickly. How many of you would want to paint all those little stars? I don't think so. Now, when we did the hat, we put a little bit of that dioxazine purple on there to kind of give that shading a little heavier value. And we're going to do the same thing with the green. Now, purple and green aren't the best of friends, but if you're careful on how you lay it in there, they'll play together pretty well. And I'm using that 1/2 inch angle. Remember where our highlights coming from the top left. So we're just going to deepen the shading. And I know along the bottom of my hat's a little messy, so this will help clean all of that up. And I'll use that dioxazine purple. And it just gives a little, and it's not a lot. It's just enough to give a little heaviness, a little weight, a little more of a solid shading there. It helps pull these dark tones together. So once you put this on there, and I'm just going to pull it across the bottom and up that right side. It just brings a different tone in there. It just really adds a lot of richness. It might look nice. It just really ramps it up quite a bit. And sometimes it's that unexpected color that makes the big difference. I always like to try different colors together. I love working with color. And to throw that purple in there was like a roll of the dice. It's either going to work and be great or it's going to be kind of icky. And I love that value that it creates. Little bit of color makes a big difference. So I've deepened the shading down here on the tips of his collar. I'm going to take the same little bit of shading and I'm going to deepen right under his neck. This is going to look like a shadow. Sorry, top of my head again. I have way too much water on my brush. I'd rather have too much water and have to lift some of it off than not have enough and have a real heavy result. So when you think about this color, think about a shadow and how transparent the shadow is. That's what you're going for. And I did pull a little bit down this right side as well, just to kind of, big difference, right? And that's so cool. Telling you we just have a little bit more to do and then we keep doing a little bit more and we still have more to do. We're getting there. What I want to do next is add this little bit of trim right here at the tip of the hat. And it just needs a little bit of something. And that trim is what really sets it off and kind of finishes it. Using my 5/0 script angle and antique gold. And we'll just line that top edge. This is just a little bit of trim. So if your little points aren't nice and even, this is where you fix them up. What a big difference that makes. It just really cleans that edge up. So I got to thinking when I did this, what kind of trim that was on the hat. And I think it's a kind of a gold braid trim. So it's a little bit decorative and has a little bit thickness to it. There's a point to this. And so I decided that right here below the braid, it would have a teeny tiny little shadow. So we're going to float some of that forest green just below that braided trim. It's, again, the whole concept that a little bit of paint makes a big difference. So just get a wee bit of that green paint and float it right below there. And it really enhances that trim because it, the yellow and the green are so close in tone that they kind of blend together. So it's all about contrast. We want to make that stand out. You're going to have to do something to create that contrast. So by shading that little bit of forest green right below that, look how it pops out. It's all these little touches that make a difference. And you could use a smaller shading brush. I just happen to have that one right here. But we just want to get that little bit of green in there. I tried to highlight the braid with white and it looked weird. So adding this little bit of shading underneath of it worked out really well. I think we're ready to do the jingle bells next. And remember my story about, my sad story about painting circles. I don't do circles well. The jingle bells are base coated antique gold, which is what we used as the trim on the collar. Just because it makes my life easier, I am going to use a circle stencil to base coat with because it creates less frustration for me. Now, you can take your brush and just paint that in, but I'm telling you, I do have a terrible time with circles. And I can clean the edges up super well with the stencil, and my circles are always perfect. So I know that's going to work well. I'm going to move it over just a touch here. And I think I'm just going to do it down here as well, just because I know I'll get that roundness. I don't know about you, but these white bells are kind of an eyesore. They look so much better just being gold. Oh, nice. And the stencils, to me, they go a little bit quicker and I know they're going to look good. If you have any areas that need a little touch, I can just go back with my brush and touch them up. after you get the jingle bells, that'd be a cute name for him, wouldn't it? Bingle. Maybe, no. Bingle Jingle Elf. After you get the Jingle Bells base coat, we're gonna go back down to that ribbon twist and get work on it for a little bit. He's so cute. He's so happy that you finished his little face first. Now he gets to sit there and smile at you. Okay, we're ready to move on to the twist. We are going to go with the milk chocolate. I have my my 1/2 inch angle, and honey brown's not a very good shade color. It's kind of yellowish, and the milk chocolate's going to give a little more darkness to those shaded areas. So I'm going to just go in with this milk chocolate just to enhance these shadow areas. And I want to sharpen up right underneath so that it looks nice and strong, and we have a really good shade right in there. And that, I'm sorry, I keep getting my head in there. That honey brown underneath is just going to add a little more depth. This milk chocolate will strengthen that shadow area and give more contrast. I honestly am not a real big fan of honey brown all by itself. It needs milk chocolate to, it's just kind of yellow. This really brings that darkness out and gives it a little more rich tone. And no, I'm not bringing the dioxazine purple down here on this lighter area. Definitely would not work well. But you can see what a difference up here where I've added the milk chocolate and down here where it's not been added. A little bit of paint makes a big difference. Okay. Kind of not happy. I've got a little bit of a mess there, but we're going to put holly leaves in there. So I'm not real concerned about it because that's going to cover this area up. So I'm okay with that. Sometimes you kind of have to look at the end result. So instead of spending a lot of time trying to clean that up, I know that it's going to be covered up and I don't really need to. When I painted my piece, number one, I didn't have a stencil. The stencil was made after I got it painted. But I put the holly leaves on first, and then I put the words on, and I kind of had trouble kind of fitting them in. So I thought in my mind, when I teach the class, we'll put the words on first, and then we can snuggle the holly leaves in around the letters. And it won't be such a challenge, because I know how frustrating that is to try to make something fit when it doesn't seem to work out. So let's go ahead and get the lettering done next. And again, not a big fan of lettering, so having a stencil is going to be a really nice treat. So I know over here I'm going to have stencils, so this is how I measure. I've got my finger there, my finger here, and I want to have plenty of room for my stencils, so just kind of a finger length away on this side from the left, and then center it in the middle of that ribbon. And don't forget to anchor it down. You do not want that moving around on you. The letters are stenciled lamp black. You may be able to get away with one coat. Lamp black is a very strong color. However, here's the deal. You don't want to put the paint on so heavy to cover it with one coat if it's going to end up kind of seeping underneath, you know, and you get those raggedy edges. So make sure that your stencil brush is loaded well and you don't have a lot of heaviness on there, because cleaning up is a whole lot harder than putting two coats on. And you know what I'm talking about. And I'm just going to do a very light tap to get that on there. After it dries, I can check and see if I'm going to need two coats. The more you work and push that paint down, the higher of a chance you're going to have of pushing it up underneath the edges. Okay. Very good. And I'll just continue on with all of the letters. And one thing about it too, when the paint dries, it kind of shrinks a little bit. So if there are some open spaces, you can go back and touch them up very easily. Now, when you get down to fun, you're going to have to move it a little more to the right. Check your line drawing. Okay, see they've got the holly over here, so your fun's going to be a little more shifted to the right. Yeah, so much easier. Now, I am going to go back and connect the O's. I don't like the way that the bridge makes them look like they're stenciled. So I'll go ahead and connect those so it looks like it's one hand painted letter. Now, sometimes when you go back and touch it up, the paint's not as thick as a stencil, a stenciled image. So you might have to put two coats on the touch up as well. I do think I'm gonna have to go back and put a second coat on. It's just not real smooth. And you'll be able to tell when you look at it. Now, if you do need to go back and touch up, we did have the white background, so I just took a little bit of Snow White and went in and touched up a place where it was a little too heavy. I went back and brightened up the highlights in his eyes. After they dried, they were just a little bit too quiet, so I wanted him to really sparkle. So these are the little things that you can look at to see if they need to be enhanced. You need to have all of your white highlight areas of equal intensity. The same thing with your dark shaded areas. All your dark areas need to be about the same intensity. So that's your contrast. If you have a shaded area that's very pale compared to another shaded area, it's just not going to look right. If you want your darks to really resonate and look strong and dark, you need to add more highlights or brightness, that contrast. It needs to really be strong. Are we ready to go back to our jingle bells? Let's get these jingle bells done. We have them base coated with antique gold. We are going to shade, and I told you our highlight is from the top and left. Okay, so this is how my mind works. This jingle bell, the highlight's coming from the top left, which sounds like it should be highlighted on the left side, but it's kind of raised up. So the highlight's going to hit it up here. So our shading is going to be on the bottom and the left side on the big jingle bell. And we are going with milk chocolate. This is such a pretty brown. I'm so glad we found each other because I think we're going to be doing a lot together in the future. Okay, I want to shade along the bottom and the left side. And then I will take that same color, but because my bells are so much smaller down here, I'm going to bump down to a 1/4 inch angle. I just have a little more control. And I'm going to shade these. I want to keep it consistent with the one up above. So I'm going to shade kind of the bottom left side and highlight up here at the top, on mostly on the right. So keep that shading consistent. I'll just shade right along here. That looks so pretty with that antique gold. they go from gaudy to just a really nice, rich bell. Would you look on my desk? I think I left my stylus. That's where I was tracing it. I think that must be where it's at. I should have looked on the floor before I sent her somewhere else, but it's not on the floor. I think I'm good. Okay. We are going to add highlights on the top and the right side with Snow White.
Stays well loved.
She thinks my stylus is well loved. It's just, we've been together a very long time. I've got my 1/2 inch angle for the big bell, and I want to bring that highlight down. I don't want it just on the top. I want it to really kind of go around and down into what I would call like the belly of the bell, so that it shows that it's really rounded. And that's with a 1/2 inch angle. Again, when I go down to the little bells, I'm going to do the same kind of highlight, but I'm going to bump down to a 1/4 inch angle so that I have a little more control. And we'll just kind of bring it down in there, make it look kind of shimmery and metallic. A little bit of paint makes such a big difference. I love it. This is one of my favorite parts, when we start doing all these little things that just really make a difference. That is just so cool. Okay, well, we need to add just a little more depth on these bells. And a little bit of color. I want to bring in just a little bit. I'm going to get just a touch of alizarin crimson. And what I want to do is just put a little hint of that color here on the bottom side of the bell. Kind of looks like it's reflecting a little bit of that color on the bell. Gives it a little richness. I'll do that down here as well. Doesn't that look pretty? Just that little bit of color. True red would make it too pinkish, and this alizarin has such a richness to it that it works really well over those darker colors. Let's go back here. love when we get close to finishing something. So I want to finish the jingle bells, get excited about that. I have my lamp black, my 18-knot script liner, and I'm going to paint just like a curved cross. I don't trace it on, I just kind of, they're like an X, I should say. I just go that way and then this way. Wherever you put it, it's going to work out fine. And same thing on these little jingle bells. We'll just do an X. I do want to keep the X like in the middle at the bottom of each one of these. So I'll turn it so that I keep that right direction. So the bottom's going to be directly at the tip of the point. So this one, same way here. I'll have to turn it so I know exactly where it's going to be. And know that it's going to be, you don't want to kind of kink to the side. Plenty of water on your brush so you can get a nice strong line. We got the jingle on there. Now we want to add these bell slots. Okay. I had a big stylus, but it's gone too. This is my no stylus day. I'm going to use the handle end of my paintbrush. I'm going to dip dot in the black paint and I'm going to dot it down and go up and down. And it gives you like an oval. Let me zoom in a little bit. So I'll dip and dot, yeah, and I'll put it there at the end of the tip and I'll just move it up, up and down, and you're going to get an oval. That's on the big bell. Okay, with the little bell, we're just going to do dots because there's not much room there. Try to get both of them in here at the same time. Nope, not going to be able to. Maybe there. Okay, so with the little one, I'm just going to dip and dot the bell slot. So they have little dip dots, they're not ovals. We'll just go out a little bit now. Now, if the tips of your X's are not the same length, this is where you can adjust it with the little dots and make them kind of even. That one's a little higher, this one's a little shorter, so I can even them up with my dot. Okay, we need to add a little more sparkle on these bells. And I am going to zoom in just a little bit on this. I can't go up too much further. Well, maybe I can go this way. Okay. Alrighty, we want to add a little highlight on the jingle bells. So I'm going to dip my stylus into Snow White, dot, drag it down. That makes a little comma stroke. Put another little dot right there. So we're going to dip, dot, drag it down, and then add a little dot up here. And I'll just do this on all the bells. Now that that white has dried, it's not as strong as what it needs to be. And We'll do the same thing on the big bell. Just gonna make a little bit bigger dot. And that little highlight. So he kind of sparkles everywhere. His, oh, did I do that? All right, his little jingle bell sparkle, his eyes sparkle. Once we get the holly on there, that's gonna have some sparkle on it. Everybody looking good? Okay. I don't see any heads nodding. I don't see any smiles. Okay, looking good. Alrighty, let's go back to the twist. I'm gonna take this little guy sitting over there so I don't drag my hand in the dip dots. Now we want to add our holly leaves on here. Gosh, this looks good. All right. I am going to have to go back and put a second coat on my letters because they're just in certain areas, they don't show up that way on the camera, but in certain areas they're a little bit thin. So I'll put the second coat on. I'll do that later. That can be done. All right, so for the holly leaves on the twist. I was going to have a stencil made that you could just pop it down there and boom, you'd have your holly leaves on. But the problem was every one of these needed to be positioned just a little bit different so it could accommodate the placement of the lettering. So we have two different large size holly leaves. One thing about holly leaves, it doesn't matter which point is the tip. So you can use this as the base or that as the base. And the reason I point that out is because if you turn them different ways, it will look like you have hand painted different holly leaves. You know, if you did the samey, then it looks like, oh, that was just stenciled on. But we want this to look a little more hand painted. So we're going to take these holly leaves, just kind of move them around. So it looks a little more hand painted. So we'll start here at the top. And if you have your color photo, you can put that beside you, or the line drawing will show you placement if you're not really sure. And that way you'll know how to position the stencil. Does it matter which one you use? No, it really doesn't. You just need two leaves for each one. And kind of shake it up, turn one this way and one that way, and it'll just be enough difference that it'll make it look very hand painted. Right. I am going to clean my stencil brush out because I have lamp black in there last, and that's definitely a super strong color. You do wash out your stencil brush. You want to just make sure that you get all the extra moisture out. See, I cleaned it and it still has all that black in there. Oh, okay. It should be over here. My little elf is moving around over here. I think he would want to go over and see Lindsay. Lindsay has a thing for elves. And gnomes. I'll say, oh man, I need to do something. I have an idea. Why don't you do an elf?
True story.
Yes. And I'll say, gee, I need an idea for a design. I have an idea. Why don't you do a gnome? So I did this one for Lindsay. And actually, she wasn't even here when I did it. She was on vacation. So I sent her a picture and I said, hey, I did this for you. Okay, so when we put these holly leaves on there, you want to make sure that, let's see, how are we going to do this? You want to make sure when you position this, get this one on here, that you have, I kind of like it when it covers the stripe up just a little bit, but it needs to be far enough over from the edge so you have plenty of room for that berry. You don't want that berry shoved right on the edge. So it needs to be pretty much straight up and down, and probably the other end of the leaf is almost on that bottom stripe. And actually, I'm going to move it over just a little bit more. I've got plenty of room, you know, between, all you have to worry about is not getting it into the word. And I've got plenty of room over there. So I'll just go ahead and get this on there. I'm just looking for an even coverage. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then the other one, I obviously can't go straight down, so I can move it over. I'm making the tips where they come together. Show and tell's a little bit easier. If I bump these points together, I'm not going to have much room for the berry, so I'm going to spread it apart just maybe like 1/8 of an inch so that I have plenty of room for that berry to kind of nestle in there. So I'll take this one and just make sure it doesn't fall over the edge. I want the base of this one to point to the base of the other one. And these will probably need 2 coats. So I have a problem with memory. And with these holly leaves, if you twist and turn them and shuffle them all around, you're not going to remember what you did. This one's dry, so I'm going to go ahead and put my second coat on so I don't have to figure out what position my stencil was in when I did that. When you put light coats on, it doesn't take very long for it to dry. So you can pop that second coat on there very easily. And you can see they're kind of drifted apart, but that's going to give me plenty of room for that little berry to be in the center. Kind of like making sure they all fit. I'm having trouble seeing where the edge of my stencil is, so I'm going to clean off my template or my stencil so I know I'm putting it in the right place. I'll just do all of it while I've got this. Okay. This one was really tight, and my leaves are going to just have to kind of be on top of each other. I think that's still going to work out. You know, unless you absolutely copy the pattern exact, you always have to tweak to make it fit. And you know, everybody has their own thumbprint, which is not a bad thing. When you get down to this bottom one, it is the smaller set because the big ones just don't fit really well on there. And that one I had to go a little closer, but it'll work out. When you get down to this bottom one, you can go ahead and just stencil it on as is. Never been a big fan of painting holly leaves, but I love holly on things. So having a stencil, it's just been fantastic for me. I don't remember what I did. There we go. Take a look at your leaves. You just don't want the like the red stripe to show through or the shading to show through, and you'll know that if they're covered well. And how do you take care of your stencils? The best thing to do is to clean them right away. If you don't, just take them and lay them in the bottom of your sink. Deco Art brush and stencil cleaner is excellent for cleaning your brushes. If the paint's super hard, hot water will help soften the paint and lift it up. But it also makes the stencils a little soft too. So if you put super hot water on and you go to scrubbing it, you might, you know, on these little delicate areas, you could damage the stencil. So keep that in mind. Nothing else, let it soak. Use hand sanitizer, will lift the paint off. I think I've got a little bit right here. You can slather a little hand sanitizer, it should come right up. If you haven't been able to find hand sanitizer, you know, that was a problem earlier this year.
The magic eraser.
Oh, magic eraser would work well too, but again, I would be concerned about delicate stencils that it might lift or might kind of damage these little pieces that are a little bit more delicate. So we've got the green on there. I'm going to let that dry. We'll give it a few minutes to dry. We'll go over to the wood cutout while we're doing holly leaves. We might as well do them all at the same time. The holly leaves, I just play around with it. Whatever way is going to work well. I kind of like it to come down below the brim a little bit. I like it to go off of the brim a little bit. I like it to stick out the side a little bit. So you just got to kind of rotate it until you find the right place that you want it to be. The reason I say this is you're going to have to highlight one side. And our light source is coming from over here. So whichever way it's turned, that's where your highlights are going to be. So once you decide which direction you're going to position this, then keep that in mind when we apply our highlights. Let's go ahead. Right now, I'm just going to base coat it with the Hauser light green. And I'm going to, and because I can't paint around all these berries, I'm just going to paint over them. The reason I paint over all of them, if I go back to do these berries and I have white on part of it and green on another, it just makes it that much harder to get an even coverage. So if it's consistent to begin with, as I add my layers of paint on, it's going to be consistent when I go to paint the berries as well. So just do a quick base coat of Hauser light green on the berry or on the holly leaves. We're going to jump back and forth because we're going to do all of this kind of at the same time. I'm going to let that dry for a minute, and I'm going in with my 1/4 inch angle, and we want to start adding our shading. So our shading is going to be along the bottom and on the right side. Forest green is the color we're going to start with. Quarter inch angle. And I'm just going to shade right along that bottom edge. And then also, let me zoom in just a touch. I'm going to shade down this side of my center vein. So I've shaded along this side, and then I'm also going to shade down that center vein. Don't turn your brush over. Keep that point toward the shading. So if I'm shading along this side, have enough moisture on your brush that you can really move it. Then I'm going to take that same, and I like to do a little bit of a curve on that so it doesn't look flat. This one I had to kind of crunch together. I'm okay with that. And then put that little vein down the center. Make sure you have enough, I got the wrong color on there. Make sure you have enough moisture on your brush so that you can do the entire leaf without having to reload. I should have started at the other end, so I have to drag my hand through it. Okay. Should have went to the 1/8 inch angle for this little one. Think how long this would have taken if we hadn't even done any shading at all, or any that didn't have the stencil to do all that base coating. Oh my goodness. I'm going to jump over and when you get that finished, put that second coat on these separate holly leaves. I think we're going to get finished right on time. Yeah. Oh, this is looking really pretty. For you speedy painters, we're going to go into the citron green, and we're going to use that color to highlight these opposite side. And that will really brighten that up. And then put a little bit down the center as well, just to give a little bit of brightness on that side of the leaf. And I do like the citron green. It's not a real heavy color, so it's not going to take much to brighten it. And it won't cover up. It won't turn the leaf a different color. It just brightens it up. I think that's what I like best about it. It's not overpowering. To me, it's almost like a neon. It just brings that highlight in there. Very pretty. Not going to take a lot. Just want to brighten up those tips. And that down the opposite side of that center vein. Wow, what a difference. A little bit of paint makes a big difference. So when somebody says, what'd you learn in class? A little bit of paint makes a big difference, and use lots of water. Those are the two things I kind of hone in on. And I think the reason is it's made such a big difference in the way I paint, and it's made it so much easier. You know, I work at Cupboard Distributing all day long, so when I go home at night, after I fix supper, is my time to paint. And I have to figure out ways to kind of move through and, not spend a lot of time doing fussy painting that's not needed. And if it does take a lot of time, I always wonder if I could figure out a way to make that just a little more, a little easier and a little less stressful. I don't like to paint things that make me feel stressed. I always think there's got to be a better way. I'm going back to my other holly leaves. They just needed one more coat. They didn't look good at all. If it says 2 coats and you look at it and it needs 3 coats, then that's where you make the decision. Yeah, I need to make 3 coats on that because it will bug you forever if you don't address it at the time. And I know you know what I'm talking about. Okay, here we're doing all right. I am going to go back in with forest green. And I'm going to use my Epic script liner. Just going to add that center vein and pull up some little vein lines. And it's sometimes the little detail that makes a difference. And I think on these holly leaves, we've not been very fussy with them, but when you add these little vein lines in, it just adds that little bit of detail that makes it look very, like you spent a lot of time on them. Make sure you put that curve in there. Get enough water on your brush so you don't have to drag the paint. You want that brush to do all the work. I went to college in the 70s and I had no clue what decorative painting was. When I got out of school, I sold oil paintings in furniture stores and restaurants. The term starving artist, you know how that is. And did paintings on consignment. I did okay. But after I was pregnant with my first child, the oil paint just made me deathly ill, which was probably a good thing because it probably wouldn't have been good for the baby. And so I put it away. I had my second baby and I really missed painting, but toddlers and oil paints don't mix very well. So I found out there was this new thing on the market called decorative painting. And they used this new paint called acrylic paint. I was so fascinated with it. And that's kind of all she wrote. I worked at the hospital by that time. And I used to paint stuff and take it in to the nurses and everybody wanted one. And you know how that is, you paint 150 bunny rabbits. And you think if I ever see another bunny, that's kind of how I got started in decorative painting. My husband was injured in an accident at work and he could not work. We had 2 little ones at home. He couldn't take care of himself. He couldn't take care of the kids. So I quit my job at the hospital and stepped out on faith and started this little tiny mail order company called Covert Distributing. And everything channeled in that direction. And that's why I am where I am today. So how exciting. You never know what how your life's going to unfold, but I am sure glad I found decorative painting because I absolutely love it. All righty, let's go ahead and work on this little piece by itself, the holly leaves. Now remember, my light source is going to come from the top left. So position it so that it is the correct position where the highlights are going to be. And I'm just going to, I think I'm going to go to a 1/4 inch brush. This one's going to be just a little bit too big. I'm going to go down. And we'll just put a little curve on that center vein so you have a little bit of, so it's not just flat, it'll have a little bit of shape to it. And this way. Okay, so we've got that one. Kind of doesn't take much to do these up once you get the light source. We are going, after you get the shading on that, we're just going to let that sit there. Kind of jumping back and forth. I know we have enough time, but all of a sudden it'll be that time and I don't want to have to race. Okay, let's go back and add the berries in, and you have the big hole for the large berries. Just going to put it right between so that it covers everything up. Now, if I do this in red, it's going to take 100 coats to get it nice and solid. So I'm going to go in with white and get a nice base coat on it with white. And that's going to help give more opaque for that red. We're just going to go in and add those red berries. This is the one that had to kind of get smooshed in there. So I'm going to kind of set the berry off to the side a little bit. Same thing over here. We'll just offset it just a touch. When you get down to the little holly leaves, switch to the small berry. It kind of looks invisible on the camera, but I've got a good coverage on that. This one might need a little bit more. I think I'll go back on these and just add a quick second coat. Make them a little more solid. White always looks nice and strong and then it dries. And it's like, oh, what happened to my white? Okay. So we're going to jump around a little bit. So we've got the white on the berries. Going to go back, and if you don't have a chance to do this, this is the same as we're doing on the small leaves. We're just going to add that citron green highlight on the tips of the leaves and the opposite side of the center vein. So we just brighten those up, and then right in here. And then I'll do the same thing with this. I'll add that center vein down the each one of the holly leaves with the Epic script liner and forest green. And, you know, this is kind of a fun, whimsical piece. So, you know, you could go in and add a lot more work on the holly leaves, but it's just kind of a lighthearted piece. And this, you shouldn't have to spend a lot of time. It's just whimsical and fun. And this is not serious toll painting. It's just an adorable piece that's fun to do for Christmas. Okay, so we've got that in there. All right, I'm going to jump back to these berries, and we need to brighten them up, definitely. Add some white, or I will add some red so they're not white. And I am going with the true red. I wanted to really resonate and be a pretty strong Christmas red.
Bonnie says she started an oil painting also. They've learned to make their color while being able to adjust any color. And she took a class in college on color and design and spent quite a bit of time learning even more.
I'm telling you, if you ever get a chance to take a color theory class at a college, it is so well worth the time. When I went to college the first year, we weren't even allowed to use color. All we did was learn about contrast and composition and values and tones and all that kind of stuff. And I thought at the time, oh, just give me some color. And the second year when we started using color, I realized how valuable all that resource was. So, you know, if you can learn the back end of art and why what is what, it does make a huge difference. Thank you for sharing that, Bonnie.
You're off camera.
I'm doing the little one.
Okay.
Little one down below here. And I'm going to go in with these. Let's see if that's big enough. Might have to paint these in here. That could be big enough. Okay. I want to go back to these berries, make sure they're dry. Remember on the hat how we deepened them down with alizarin crimson? And I'm going to go in there with that seam. I'm using my 1/8 inch angle. Now the highlight's the top left, so we're going to shade across the bottom and up the right side. My alizarin's just a little bit dried out. Alizarin's another color I never really use much of, but boy, it's a beautiful color. I'm going to start down here, just be easier. I won't drag my hand through it. And this really makes those reds gorgeous. Just brings that deep hue there. They look so pretty. And I am shading it heavy. I want these to really look around. Got a little spot there. And see, you can't even tell those leaves were way too close together, just because I shifted the position of that berry. There's so many ways to fix stuff. I think the biggest thing is figuring out what's wrong. Oh, that looks good. Just gonna take and make these berries red. Now, while all of this is drying, and I'm moving along a little bit quickly, but we're getting down to the last 15 minutes, and I do want to cover this. We need to add a little bit of shadowing around these holly leaves so that it looks like they're lifted off, or they're dimensional off of the ribbon. Going in with a little bit of burnt umber, and I've got my 1/4 inch angle. Just going to do a little bit of a shadow to the right of this and around the berries and right below. And that's just going to give you another layer of dimension that kind of lifts it up. So we'll just go to the right of all of those. Very soft. This is not a heavy shade. This is a transparent shadow. So it's just a very light little shade of color. It's so light that I can go over the J and it's not going to shade the color. More water than paint, probably. It's another one of these little touches that's going to make a big difference. It just adds so much. It's just really amazing. I just love decorative painting. Just so cool. Okay. Now remember that dioxazine purple. We added it to all the shading on the hat and the collar. So now we need to bring a little of that down here as well. So I'm going in with my 1/8 inch angle, and I'm just going to deepen those berries just a little bit, and with that color. And it's same place right here along the bottom and up this right side. Oh, isn't that beautiful?
What color was painted on the behind the holly, the shading color?
It was burnt umber. And I know we're going kind of fast right now, but You will get the video. Lindsay said tomorrow. So keep an eye on your mailbox and look for that. Make sure when you receive it, it is much easier to view if it's downloaded. If you view it from the cloud, I don't know what it does, but it gets kind of choppy, and I don't know the reason why, but it works better if you download it.
It's because you're watching it on the server. That's why.
Lindsay said it's because watching it on the server.
As opposed to your own
Whatever. Okay, I'm going to go in with alizarin and shade these berries on the holly leaves. And I see just a little bit of white poking through here. Just go ahead and touch that up. All right, I'm going to get my stylus, Snow White. We need to add some highlights on that holly. A good old dip, dot, drag, and we'll add those comma strokes. That just really brings them to life. And I will go back with my stencil and redo those lettering, but they don't look bad. They just need a little more opaqueness to them. Okay, I remember that dioxazine that we added on the berries. We're going to do the same thing right here. Just going to bump that down. Oh, that just looks so pretty. What a difference that makes. And a little bit there. Now, in my berries, it's kind of around the berries. It's not very shaded. So I'm going to take that same color. Remember, we use that on the collar. But look what happens if I go around that berry with that same color, pull a little bit on this bottom shaded area. I'm not going to do it down the middle, but I want to keep that area in here. Looks like it's really shaded. Bring a little bit of darkness in. What a huge difference. See how empty it is inside? If I go in with this dioxazine purple, I can add that right around there. Pull a little bit across the bottom of these leaves. And it fills all of that emptiness in. It kind of pulls it all together. Now I do need to go in and add some highlights on there. You don't want to leave those out. Oh, that looks great. Okay, let me take a look here and see if we missed anything. My watch said it's time to stand up. Okay.
Don't forget to talk about the edges.
Aha, the edges. Okay, so this is my fun thing that I figured out. I keep telling you, I'm not lazy, I'm just crunched for time. So you know how you paint the edges and they get really messy? I figured there's got to be a better way. So I thought, you know how you paint, you get paint on the front, you get paint on the back, and you think, you touch this up and touch that up. So I decided I probably could do a better job with my finger. So I tried it, and actually I can do a better job with my finger. With this one, it has a lot of little in and out places. You're still going to have to touch them up with a brush. But on his ear, I can take my finger and just run right down the edge, clean it up. Now, your finger is no different than a brush. If you don't use a dry brush, you don't use a dry finger. So I'm going to get my finger just a little bit damp. I'm going to go into the lamp black. Actually, maybe I'll do just a little bit of burnt umber. I don't want it quite that dark. And if you overload your brush, you're going to have a mess. If you overload your finger, you're going to have a mess. So I'm just going to take and gently glide it on the edge. Now I've got a perfect coverage, nothing on the front, nothing on the back. Now, if it takes 2 coats with your brush, it's going to take 2 coats with your finger. So I can go around this edge. I can clean all of this up very easily just by very gently touching it with my finger. Now, my finger won't go in these little pointy parts because it's not shaped that way. So I'll have to touch it up with my brush. But I can definitely see that bell, how raggedy it is. I can just touch that up and nothing on the front, nothing on the back. Super, super easy way to clean up your edges. If you do get a little bit on the front, I would suggest you spray varnish it first. But if you do get a little bit on the front, just simply wipe it off. Such a great way to clean those edges up. This works on 1/8 inch up to 1/4 inch. After that, you're probably going to have to go with a brush because just the size of your finger and the size of the surface. But just a super easy way to clean those edges up. And I can go around all those edges just very easily and clean them up. Isn't that great? So hopefully that will save you some time. Any questions? We did really well. Yeah, I think we need to have a show and tell. Everybody hold your pieces up. We want to see them. Oh, they are so cute. If you've not finished them yet, finish them. But do me a favor and put them on Facebook. They are just darling. Please show them off to the world because they look fantastic. Aren't those cute? Donna, Susan, Heather, Lorraine,
They all
Luann.
have such different personalities.
They do. And, you know, I always think that's so funny that we all paint the same piece, but everybody uses their own thumbprint. So you can, Nancy, I love yours. You can have all these different little faces from the same pattern, and one will look mischievous, one will look ornery, one will look kind of happy, and another will look soulful. It's just so much fun. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, chris@cdwood.com. I will be more than happy to answer any questions. Would love to see the finished piece. And again, I thank you for joining me. Oh, Lindsay's pointing over here. On January 28th, I will be doing Hello Snow. And I don't know if you can see it very well. This has a lot of technique in it. There's little pine trees in the background. We're going to be stamping, stenciling, a lot of technique on this, a lot of layers. It's going to be a super fun class. January 28th from 12 to 4. I think it's a Wednesday. Is that right, Lynn?
Thursday, I think.
Or maybe it's a Thursday. Okay. Check your calendar. I'm not good at dates.
The shade behind the leaves was burnt umber, correct?
Yes. You could even use the milk chocolate, any dark color behind the leaves. You just need to get that shadow effect from it. Any other questions?
And registration opened on that class an hour ago.
Okay. Oh, Lindsay's been busy while I've been painting. Lindsay's been working hard over here, getting everything set up. So you can go ahead and sign up for that class. We do have a class bundle again for the project. So it makes it really super easy when you get everything all together. You don't have to figure out what pieces you need to get the class done.
Elizabeth says, thank you so much for this class. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Mary says, thank you, Chris and Lindsay, for a wonderful afternoon. Most enjoyable. You're welcome.
Peace of mind. Know that you'll get the video tomorrow. So if you didn't get finished today, if you were tired or weren't able to keep up, not a problem. That's what I think is so amazing about Zoom, is the fact that even if you fall behind, or you know, a lot of times it's just hard to sit for 4 hours straight. This gives you the opportunity to paint at your leisure and still have instruction right there. And this is so much better than a pattern packet. You can actually see, stop it, run it back, and play it again if you need to. So it's just so very convenient.
Doris Jean said, thank you, another great project.
You are welcome. And I want to thank everyone for not only joining me today, but for your patronage, your loyalty, your support. It just means a lot to know that you do appreciate my designs. I try to work really hard and come up with new techniques and interesting, hopefully trendy projects that would be fun to paint. Not only things that you can use for that particular project, but also carry forward into other projects. And I always think we all have a lot of pattern packets in our stash, and some of them are like 20, 30 years old. And I'm not judging, because I have the same thing, but you know, over a period of time, they do become dated. So if we can take those dated projects and just put fresh touches on them, you know, with the background, adding stencils, stamps, whatever, all of a sudden they become very trendy. And they're really good designs. Just because they're old doesn't mean they're out of, you know, they're no good anymore. So I encourage you to look at your stash and see what you have, and think about bringing some other techniques. I know when I first started painting, all the backgrounds were one color. You know, you just, and you had to mix all the paint. So if you made a boo-boo and had to go back and touch it up, good luck coming up with that identical color. But, you know, things have changed. And now the backgrounds, we can just play with the paint and add so many fun and interesting touches and make it your own. And I always encourage you to put your own thumbprint on it. Be creative, and this is what we do and this is our enjoyment. So if something is stressful or frustrating, there's got to be a better way. So play around with paint and try to come up with some new things. This is how we grow, and this is how we keep things interesting. And you know, we just keep that fuel for the love of decorative painting. We just keep that going. So again, I want to thank you all for joining me today. And I, from the bottom of my heart, I wish you a very merry, and be safe. Everybody be careful out there. Be safe, enjoy your holidays, and keep those brushes moving. So thank you again. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Bye-bye.